Welcome to Brilliantly British. My name is Lard and today we are making bread. It's really simple, really easy, and it's something you can eat on a day-to-day basis. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. To make today's simple loaf of white bread, you will need some plain white bread flour, water, lard, salt and sugar, and then I'm going to be using some fresh yeast, but dry active yeast will do the exact same job. Finally, I always say this, you're going to be cooking, in this case, baking, so get yourself a nice cup of hot tea to stay hydrated. To get ourselves started, we're going to add some fresh yeast and some sugar to this jug of warm water. It's crucial that the water is no warmer than body temperature because you will end up killing your yeast if that is the case. So in this goes, and then give that a whisk, making sure that the yeast has dissolved and the sugar has dissolved. When the sugar and the yeast have dissolved completely, leave this to sit for around 10 to 20 minutes or until you start to see bubbles appearing in this mixture. That'll indicate that your yeast is alive and is suitable and ready to use to make your bread. Whilst the yeast blooms, we're going to prepare our dry ingredients, and that simply consists of adding salt to our bread flour. That's it. The reason we don't add the salt to the yeast mixture is because the salt would end up killing the yeast, and that is why we ended up adding it to the flour here. We need to melt our lard to then mix it with our yeast mixture, and the best way to do that is to put it in a glass, add a bit of water, and then for a few seconds melt it in the microwave, and that is exactly what I'm going to do now. By the way, some crucial advice. If you melt the lard in the microwave, don't do what I did by heating it for more than 10 seconds at a time and leaving it in the microwave uncovered, unless you want the inside of your microwave to be coated with lard, just like mine was. Whew. Okay, now we're ready to add our melted lard to our yeast mixture here. This has become quite hot, so what you want to do is add this in gradually and whisk it in until fully incorporated. Then we'll be ready to add it to our flour and begin to make our dough. We're ready to combine our dry and wet ingredients to form our dough. So in will go our bread flour, which we've added salt to. We're just going to make a little hole in the middle here and then gradually add in our mixture, a wet mixture. We've roughly mixed the dough. The ingredients haven't been properly and thoroughly incorporated. What we're going to do is cover this with a cloth and allow this to sit for 10 minutes. This gives the flour a chance to absorb some of the moisture and in the end gives you a much better dough. Okay, we have rested this dough for 10 minutes. Now, it's already bubbling, which means the yeast is starting to do its work. Now what we're going to do is begin to knead this. And because this is a particularly wet dough, I'd recommend you get yourself one of these, which is a bench scraper. They're really cheap, especially if you get a plastic one like this, and just fold the dough over itself. The water helps to keep the dough in control. As we fold the dough over itself, we're developing the gluten in the dough, which ultimately will give us the strength and texture in our bread. We want to continue to do this for about 10 minutes. After folding the dough over for 10 minutes on a well-floured workbench, turn out your dough and fold in the sides before flipping and forming into a ball. For best results when rolling the dough, make sure your hands are always in contact with the workbench. Now when you have a taut ball, grease your bowl lightly with oil as well as the surface of the ball before returning to the bowl to proof and double in size, covering it with a damp cloth as you wait. Whilst the dough proofs, take the time to lightly grease your loaf pan before coating with flour, knocking out any excess flour. Back to the dough. As you can see, it's risen superbly, ready for me to smack it down to size. Stress relieved, on a floured surface, I'll turn out the dough and then pat it to the width of my loaf pan, following that step by folding both sides in, one on top of the other. To finish this process, I'll tightly roll the dough lay it into my loaf pan before flouring its surface and then leaving it to proof once more under a damp cloth. Before we continue, I'll switch on my oven to begin preheating. Whilst the oven preheats, I'll place within it an oven-safe vessel filled with boiled water. This will generate steam in the oven, which will enable the development of a gorgeous crust. Speaking of the dough, when it looks as marvelous as this and is just beginning to come up to the edges, my friends, it will be time to begin baking. So in it goes. If all has gone to plan, then what should come out will resemble this fragrant and stunningly bronze loaf of bread. After a minute or two, gently remove it from the pan and cool it on a wire rack. If you honestly can't wait to eat it, give it at least 30 minutes before slicing. The bread has cooled down and smells wonderful, looks wonderful, has a good crust to it. So I think without much further ado, we should get tasting. Okay people, let's do this. I've got some homemade butter here on my butter knife and it spreads beautifully. Here we go. It's delicious. I mean, bread and butter, it doesn't get more fundamental than that. And I've shown you now how to make both of these things by hand so you can have the pleasure of eating them and knowing that you've made them yourselves and you know exactly what's in them. You know what? We regularly toast bread like this, so I'm not going to disappoint you. I'm also going to toast it and do a second tasting session. I'm going to spoil you guys today. We have toast. I'm going to butter this once more. Oh, it just melts on contact beautifully. And no, we're not done just yet. Not done just yet. I've got something extra special for you. So we've got some marmalade here. If you don't know how to make that, the link is up there. We've got some apricot jam, we've got some raspberry jam and some strawberry jam, the link of which is up there. Today, the choice. We're gonna go for some raspberry jam. Nice warm toast, raspberry jam, and a cup of the good stuff. Make sure you've got both of these in hand. Homemade stuff is just so good. I don't know whether it's just because I've made it, because you will make it. It just tastes so much better, period. Oh, and how do you make toast even better? In here. God, make this, please. Thank you so much for tuning in to watch this episode. You now know how to make your everyday white loaf of bread to make sandwiches, toast, etc., etc. If you like this episode, click on the like button below, subscribe to this channel, tell everyone you know about the brilliantly British food on this channel, and I will see you next time. Throw food all around this place next week. Today we're making a pie, a custard pie, you know. Tell everyone you know about the brilliantly food. I've got the homemade butter on the fork here. On the what? This is not a fork.